Afternoon, folks. I know 3 videos in 3 days is a bit much, but this is one I've been wanting to do for the last week or two. I think I'm a little bit late to this thread. This is going to be a response to a challenge set by the esteemed Alan of the excellent Static Traveller channel. And his challenge to the VC is based around the book 1001 Albums to Hear Before You Die. I'm sure that most of you will be aware of the book, even if, like myself, you've never actually owned a copy. The contents, there's been multiple editions of this book over the years. The contents vary a bit from edition to edition, but there's always the usual suspects, which, to be honest, quite rightly appear in there because they're classic albums and have been so for 30, 40, 50 years. The problem I have with the book is that there's also a large degree of recency bias to it, in that there's always albums there that have just been released in the last 3-4 years of the edition being put out. For me, I don't think an album probably should be in there if it hasn't been out for at least 15-20 years and deserves its place because it's kept its status for that period. Anyway, so Alan challenged us to come up with 5 albums that we personally think should be included in that book. 5 additional items. As I said, I've never owned the book, but I went online and found a listing of what was claiming to be the 2021 edition, which might be the latest one, I'm not sure. So I've chosen 5 albums that I think should be in there. There's various ways of obviously choosing these. I find it very difficult. I could have picked dozens. But I've just gone with favourite albums and generally styles of music that I don't think were included or not included to a large degree in the book and in that 2021 listing. The only restriction I put on myself was that I wasn't going to show an album by an artist that already appeared on the list. So, for example, I would have loved to put Faust's debut album on here, but the compilers of the list had already included Faust 4, a safer option, but for me, should have been the debut. So, no Faust debut. So, I'm going to try and make this a quick one. First up, it just had to be an album that I consider, along with Close to the Edge, which I think is on the list, to be one of the greatest albums of all time. And you guessed it, it's Magma, with their 1973 album, Mechanic Destructive Commando. Magma, obviously a French progressive rock band formed in, I think, 1969 by Christian Vander. He came up with a style of music that became a whole new genre of itself called Zool, Zeuhl, and a fictional language in which to perform the music, Kabayin. This was their 3rd album and introduced us to the incredible range of singing of Klaus Blaskowitz and the absolutely earth-moving, literally, bass work of Yannick Top, alongside Vander's incredible drumming. As one critic said, MDK, Mechanic Distributed Commando, is one giant creative blow to the guts, and unsuspecting listeners will be left powerless at the end of its onslaught of mutated funk, pummeling gospel rock, and incantatory vocals in a barbaric invented language. How could this not be one of the 1001 albums you listen to before you die? The next album I would like to include is another from one of my favourite bands, and another, I think, artist and style of music that's not included in the list. And this is Univers with their second album, Heresy. Univers were a Belgian band formed in 1974 by their drummer Daniel Denis. It's a dark style of progressive rock, heavily influenced by 20th century chamber music. They were part of the rock in opposition movement with bands like Stormy Six and Henry Cow and Art Zoid. Obviously, influences, well, like I say, early 20th century classical music like Bela Bartok and Igor Stravinsky. But they were one of the most unique and influential bands to come out of the progressive rock genre. And they were the creators of the subgenre that's called chamber rock. They have the reputation of being the darkest band ever. That's hard to contradict when you hear their music. But their second album, is probably their darkest and scariest in many places, what you expect with a track called Jack the Ripper. It's one of their best efforts, and definitely not recommended for the faint-hearted. A wonderful album from a wonderful band. Definitely should be in the book. The third album I would include is a style of music that I don't think was represented at all in the list, and that is minimalism. I could have shown 2 or 3 albums here, like Steve Reich's 18 Music for 18 Musicians, or Terry Riley's Rainbow and Curved Air. But I'm going for the album that introduced me to minimalism, and that's the wonderful Einstein on the Beach by Philip Glass. Minimalism is a sort of form of music that employs repetitive patterns, pulses, drones, and reiteration of musical phrases. This album is typical of that style of music, with incessant hypnotic rhythms, soundscapes, repeated chants. Absolutely superb. I don't have the vocabulary to describe this type of music, really, but all I can say is that there's beauty in repetition. And now for something totally different, as the Pythons would say. And we go to the Rain Parade. They were a band out of Los Angeles in the 80s, part of the Paisley Underground, formed by Matt Piucci and David Roback, along with David's brother, Stephen Roback. And this album, The Emergency Third Rail Power Trip, get that right, Pete, was released in 1983, their debut album. And this is probably the most psychedelic record that came out of the whole Paisley Underground scene, that was a style of music that was obviously heavily influenced by the 60s psychedelic era. This is an album of chiming guitars, melodic experimentation, vocals which are in that typical psychedelic vein have seemed to come from light years away. It's a wonderful album. This is not just, I think, one of the best psychedelic albums from the Paisley Underground era, and probably the trippiest of that era, but probably one of the best psychedelic albums of all time, to be honest. The Paisley Underground saved music for me. I'd got into music in 73, around then. By the early 80s, most of my favourite bands had either gone, had fallen foul of the 80s virus, or just weren't being reported on in the papers. By the early 80s, I had given up reading any of the music mags that was out in it for me. I didn't like the music that was coming out. But then along came bands like the Rain Parade, the Long Riders, Dream Syndicate, bands like that. And my interest in music was totally renewed again. So this, for me, would have to be in the book. And finally, my fifth choice is from an artist that, if you've seen the equivalent response video by my great friend, Mr. Baggy Hi-Fi, John chose this artist for, I think, his fifth choice. He pointed out that there was very little folk music in the list, outside of probably just Fairport Convention, quite rightly so. No Steel Ice Band, which is a great shame. And I could even think of definitely three albums by the Albion Band that should be in the list. But John chose Shirley Collins and her album with her sister Dolly, Anthems of Eden, and that's a great choice. I too, therefore, for my last album, I'm going to show one by Shirley Collins, but this is her 1976 album with the Albion Country Band, No Roses. This is a superb folk rock album. This is, I think, the first time she had electric backing. On here, the Albion Country Band has about 26 members, including Lal and Mike Waterson, Royston Wood, Roger Powell, Richard Thompson, Maddie Pryor, Simon Nicol, Ashley Hutchins, who Shirley was married to at the time, Lol Coxill, Tim Rennick, Ian Whiteman, Barry Dransfield, Nick Jones, Dave Mattox, Dolly, her sister, and John Kirkpatrick. Dolly is one of the quintessential English female voices of the era, with her, her sound and voice steeped in that English tradition. This album sits for me right alongside Legion Leaf as an essential part of any folk rock collection. And as you can even see that quite a few members of Fairport actually appear on here. So another one that would be a must for me on the list. So there you go. Thank you, Alan, for that challenge. I enjoyed doing it, even though I struggled to keep it down to 5. But for once, I thought I'd follow the rules. So there you go. I'm going to go off and watch some of the other entries. There's been quite a few I've noticed that have come up now. Thank you, Alan, again. And thank you for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye.